Pat Mayo Hour.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Hour, UFC Denver DraftKings picks and preview. To break it all down with me, by breaking it down with me, I mean telling me what's going to happen. It's Cody Saftic of the Bookie Beatdown. What's happening?
Bam! 1 for 1 to start the year. Pat on cash games, GPP not so much. But good little roll, so let's keep it going.
Yeah, as long as we're hitting above like 60% in the cash games, we're going to win every week.
Yeah, they always say, you want to go 60%, 63%. This year we're going 65 to 70%.
Well, that's good because we have to factor in the rake, too. And we have to factor in all those people that watch the show, play the cash game lineup, and just tie.
That's been happening a lot. However, what can you do? Everybody knows the trick is play a couple of lineups. However, I'm not sandbagging you. I'm giving you a good lineup that I feel has a good chance of coming through, so hopefully we can make it 2-2 to start the year.
So first thing that sticks out to me, and you actually just brought this up before we turned on the cameras. Well, I guess the cameras were turned on. We just weren't recording yet.
Of course.
Is in Denver.
Denver.
Who's going to gas out? And how do we know which one of those people are going to gas out?
Exactly. Well, you always look towards heavyweights as, geez, if this gets out of the first round, someone's going to get tired. Unfortunately, the heavyweight fight under Arlovski versus Francis Ngannou, I don't see it getting out of the first round, which is why you can see Francis Ngannou is going to headline our GPP team as well as our cash game team. I think he's safe would be a stretch just because it's a heavyweight fight. You have to keep that in consideration. Also, this is not a guy that's gone 3 rounds in his career, so if it's going to affect anybody, that altitude, it would be him. I just have a very strong feeling that he's going to be able to land something on Andre Arlovski and put him down the way that 9 other fighters have in the past.
$9,600 is pricey.
Very pricey.
So, talking about your cash game team, he's going to headline both of them, but on the cash team, what does that do to the rest of your team? Like, you're going to have to make a sacrifice somewhere.
You know, it's funny you say that. So I started out my team this week by saying, I'm going to go with the GPP. So let me take a couple guys that I think got some risk, but a good chance of scoring. So I take them, and then by the end of it,
it's a cash game team?
No, but I can afford everybody I want. The only person I could not afford at the time was Marcos DeLimo, who I don't want anyways. So I thought to myself, geez, I can really load up a good little GPP. Flip side to that, I'm putting the cash game team together, and well, a lot of them are fighters that I already like anyways. So you'll see very few changes in between cash game and GPP, and I think you'd be good to play either team into either type of tournament.
All right, so tell me about this cash team. Eric Spicely.
Yeah, so I was talking about Francis Ngannou, Frankie Murder, as Paul Shaughnessy has coined it, and that's going to take off at some point because it's
Frankie Murder?
Very accurate.
Now, has he actually murdered anyone?
If you've seen, he's 4-0 in the UFC. He's finished all 4 fighters, and very much so, you're like, if that guy is not dead, he's dead on the inside. His life will never be the same because Francis Ngannou just touched him with the hand of God and it put him down.
All right, I don't think we need too much analysis on him. The rest of the team is where we need to get to.
Fair enough. Eric Spicely, this guy was very much a write-off in many sense of the words. He's a regional scene guy, comes from, I believe, like New Hampshire, Massachusetts, that area, East Coast, so to
New
speak.
Hampshire.
Yeah, and you know what? Good, solid grappling credentials on him. You see him in the regional scene, he goes out there, he takes guys down, he dominates once he gets to the ground. Very aggressive even. So he tries out for the Ultimate Fighter. Getting a little bit older, I believe 29 at the time, finally gets a good crack on the Ultimate Fighter. He's got a spectacular record going into the house, wins his fight in spectacular fashion to get into the house, and unfortunately in the house he ran into a fighter by the name of Andrew Sanchez. Now important to note, Sanchez was on paper a better wrestler, probably par grappler, and Andrew Sanchez is a 205-pounder, big guy. So Eric Spicely comes out of the UFC. He cuts back down to 185. He ends up fighting Sam Alvey, another fighter on the card. Does not go his way. In fact, he gets caught by a standing guillotine choke. I'm not going to say borderline embarrassing, but you're a high-level brown belt, if not, nearing that promotion to a black belt. You're very good in grappling. Sam Alvey's going to catch you with a standing guillotine. Not the best look. This guy's earmarked to get cut, but they decide not to cut him. They decide to give him worse punishment than getting released from the UFC, is they ship him off to Brazil to fight a gigantic Brazilian by the name of Thiago Santos in Brazil. This guy's a 5-1 underdog. He takes the back, he sleeps him, puts him out. Doesn't put him out, he taps him, right? Santos, get off me. Big win for Spicely, and that really opens up your eyes. Man, you can write this guy out and you can say he's not in great shape. Athletically, he does not seem like an athlete. Says he got his start into fighting because he was a skateboarder and he'd go to the skate park and fight guys. It all doesn't add up. But when you see this guy's grappling credentials, that's where he can strive. When I look at this fight against Chirico is very average in every one area. He comes to the UFC on the Croatian card against Bojan Veličković and never really pulls the trigger very firmly. His grappling's okay. That seems to be what he likes the most. He's got robotic stand-up. For the most part, he just doesn't excel in any one area. It's the second fight in the UFC where he fights in Vancouver actually against Gareth McClellan. Now, I love every fighter, but I'd like to call it as it is. Gareth McClellan is awful. No good. Not UFC level. Gareth McClellan gives this guy everything he can handle.
Okay, this is the guy that we're taking, right?
Alessio Di Chirico. is the guy.
Oh, okay.
Is the opponent. I'm saying Spicely's easy to write off. You can write off Spicely. Wasn't looking all that good against good guys. But that win in Brazil is the eye-opener. His opponent, DiChirico, has never even had an eye-opener. He's technically speaking 1-0-1 in the UFC. He got a draw in his debut in a fight that I thought he lost. And in the second fight, to be honest, maybe he did earn the victory. I didn't think he looked good at all. Now, he's getting taken down repeatedly against the South African fighter. South African fighter is not known for their wrestling, certainly not known for their jiu-jitsu. That's all stuff that Spicely gets him in the same position. He makes him pay. So I think Spicely is going to make him pay. It's a cash game team. I'm going to put Spicely more on the safe side only because DiChirico doesn't have the punching power to hurt him and to finish him. Therefore, it's likely going to go 3, and I'm going to take the guy I think will prevail either in between or by 3. That's Eric Spicely.
You said Spicely not the best athlete?
Not the best athlete at all.
Does that mean he's one of these potential guys that could gas out, just not a great athlete?
You would like to think that, no, that's not going to happen. And absolutely. But, very important to note here that a lot of the time you see these guys and they're shredded and they're ripped and they've cut a lot of weight to make it down there. Fighting is not all about physique, and you see a lot of these Muay Thai fighters especially, or maybe some collegiate wrestlers. They've got great gas tanks. They can physically go as long as you need them to go. They're just not ripped up. They don't look the part, so to speak. I'm not going to lie. His fights in the UFC, he's finished both. He got finished in the first round, and he finished in the first round. His fight on The Ultimate Fighter, he finished in the first round. He got finished in the first round. He fights fast, and that could definitely hurt him, 100%. But I'm going to side with him, and I'm going to think that even if he does gas out, wins the first round, loses 2 and 3, loses the decision, it will be a decision. I don't see him getting taken out. But you're right, it's a possibility.
So if he has a history of getting finished in the first round, even if you do think, I mean, obviously he's the favorite, he's $8,800, would it be worth playing this cash lineup in a GPP and just swapping him out for the underdog?
Yeah, Spicely's someone who didn't make as I mentioned, I made my GPP team first, and Spicely wasn't exactly someone who jumped off the list right away because he's expensive at $8,800.
Like, do you only have him in your cash lineup because you can afford whoever?
No, I honestly think that, here's the thing, like we're talking about, he gets finished in the first round, but he's also got that ability to finish in the first round. Now, bear with me on this. When this guy gets on top of an opponent, he wrecks shop. Now, if you look at those 2 last defeats that he had, the only 2 defeats of his career, technically, one's an exhibition match against Andrew Sanchez, who's black belt level. Trains out of the K-Dojo Warrior tribe in New Jersey. He's the man. He's set. And Sam Alvey is at least a proven veteran, a guy that's been around for a very long time. DiChirico is an Italian fighter. And these Italian fighters, they've had a bit of a boom in Italy, where MMA became popular. So they've had to leave Italy and come stateside and work on predominantly their grappling, which is just not up to snuff. It hasn't really caught up. So Spicely's ace in the hole happens to be what DiChirico will probably be vulnerable at.
Where would Italy stack up on the countries in terms of good at MMA?
Top
10?
I don't think
Fringy top 10?
Fringy top
10? Like, what would be the best? The States and Brazil?
States is number 1. I got Russia as number 2. Brazil's obviously up there in the mix.
Canada's all right.
Canada's okay.
Australia's a bit worse.
Australia's good. England's good. France is starting to pump out a lot of fighters. Beyond that, you're going to have... I don't know if you can differentiate Russia in parts or as just one
Well, let's just call it the Soviet bloc.
I would say that Filipinos have better MMA fighters than the Italians have because I watch a lot of ONE FC and I see the guys coming out of Philippines and they're fantastic. And not that saying the Italian guys aren't coming out and looking good. It's just that when you look in the UFC, there was only ever one Italian guy for the longest time, Alessio Sakara. He eventually got cut. He goes back to Italy, Pat. Now he leaves the UFC, broken goods, can't compete anymore. He goes back to Italy, undefeated since he ran back to Italy, back as a number 1 guy in Italy because the level's just not the same. There are other guys that they've sent over. Marvin Vettori, I saw him fight at UFC in Las Vegas, UFC 207, flat performance. And he was one of the better looking kids coming out of Italy. 23, training at King's MMA. Sky was the limit for him. When you look at DiChirico, he's a lesser version than that. He looked poor against Gareth McClellan. There's no denying that. And when I think about Gareth McClellan and that level compared to Eric Spicely, I think, geez, it's got to be Spicely. You're right. The altitude makes me worried, but on a cash game team, I don't think he gets finished. 8,800, I can afford it. I'll take the dream catcher, Eric Spicely.
Jason Knight at 8,500 is up next.
Jason the Kid Knight. First of all, this guy's as durable as anything that you've ever seen in your life. I mean, watching him on the regional scene, he gets in your face, he goes for it 100% of the time. Now, against Musa Kamayev, which is his last regional show fight for Titan FC before signing with the UFC, he's outmatched by a bigger, stronger, and more skilled Russian. But he never quits on himself, and eventually he locks him up in a beautiful triangle and chokes him out. Great performance out of Kid Knight. He signs with the UFC and they give him Kawajiri. The guy's got 40 fights. He's fought at the highest level. they call him Jason the Kid Knight. He's 22 years old when he signs with the UFC. He gets stifled by Kawajiri, but I don't think people really got to see what he's capable of. It's been his last 2 fights against Daniel the Hangman Hooker and Jim Ehlers that you see what he's capable of. He's hard-nosed, he gets in the pocket, he throws bombs the entire time. If he ends up on his back, not to worry. He will threaten with submissions the entire time. High guard, rubber guard, looking for the triangles I mentioned, which he loves it. He'll transition to the armbar, and as you defend, try to get one arm in with the head and switch to the triangle. Very active off his back. Now, the other thing that I didn't really know what I was getting out of him was his wrestling. But against Jim Ehlers, a guy that wrestled lowly collegiately, but wrestled collegiately, and was a black belt in BJJ at the time, he could take down Ehlers almost at will if he wanted to. Against Hooker, Hooker's tall and lanky, but good on the ground, he could take down Hooker as well. He's shown a lot of versatility. So when I think about him in this spot, and I think Bruce Leroy is going to have a longer reach advantage, going to be a little more experienced, but Bruce Leroy's 2-4 over his last 6 fights. He doesn't have a proven track record. He's fought in the UFC a dozen times, and he has a losing record within the promotion. No doubt he's talented, no doubt he's durable, but Jason the Kid Knight's that next level. He's on the way up, and his style of getting in the pocket, throwing bombs, is a cash game dream. I would say he's a GPP dream. The only thing that's fainting him is that he hasn't actually knocked out any opponent inside the UFC. So even though he throws a punch like a baseball pitcher throws a fastball, even if it lands, it hurts them, but it's not been knocking them out. And I don't expect this opponent to get knocked out as well. However, Jason Knight, 3 action-packed rounds, transitions on the ground, strikes, submission attempts, wrestling.
Would you say that maybe he's a better DraftKings fighter than maybe a real-life fighter?
Well, the problem with him is that he doesn't really. He's one of those guys that is not thinking when that cage door closes and they lock it. Mind shut off, and the only thing he's thinking is kill, right? Kill, 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 and he'll go for it. And just an awesome moment is when he fights Jim Ehlers. Jim Ehlers is, as I mentioned, BJJ black belt. I think Jason the Kid Knight, is only a purple belt at the time. People are thinking, oh, Ehlers will get him down. He bombs Ehlers, puts his hands up, puts his leg out, and says, try to take me down, bitch. We all know that's what you want. And Ehlers tries to take him down and can't. You know, this guy is confident. He's cocky. He's brash. And in his last 2 fights, there's the argument that he loses the 3rd round because he marches forward with his chin up and his hands down, and he gets bombed, and it doesn't faze him. Now at 22, now he's 23, you can do that. You can't do that at 30. So for the time being, I think he's a good DraftKings player and a good MMA fighter. You just don't know how damage is going to affect these guys as their career prolongs.
All right, so when we look at some of these more even fights on your cash
There are a lot of even fights.
And GPP team, you're heavy on Shevchenko over Pena.
Yeah, Shevchenko over Pena, 5 rounds is the first thing we got to talk about. So we talk about this all the time when it's a 5-round fight. If you think it might go the distance,
You could potentially use both fighters if it goes the distance.
You could potentially use both fighters.
We're not going to do that.
No, we're not going to do that. Juliana Pena lives and dies by the takedown. She needs that takedown. She'll tell you that her striking is improving. And I'll tell you what, she probably has a lot of power for the division, but what's power if you can't set up the shots? And that's her issue. She can't set up the shots. We've seen her in her past couple of performances against Jessica Ai and her last fight at UFC 200 against Kat Zingano. She just marches through the pocket, swings bombs, head up in the air. Not very technical at all. A lot of power. Not very technical. But when she gets that clinch, she's so much stronger than these girls. Inside trip, outside trip. Inside trip, outside trip. And she'll just take you to the ground. Once she gets on the ground, she just dominates on top. But that's not going to score a whole lot in DraftKings. I know the takedowns will, but she's very much a 1, maybe 2 takedown a round, and that would be it. In a regular fight, plus her win bonus, she might score 60, 70 points. I don't expect her to get this here. Valentina Shevchenko is a black belt in judo. She's going to be a lot harder to take down than some of these other girls. She probably will get taken down in the early going, but this is a 5-round fight. And I don't want to compare it to, Claudia Gadelha versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. But let's look at that fight as an example. We had Jędrzejczyk on that, and she scored astronomically high.
It's the most points I've ever seen anyone score.
Right. Now, she actually lost rounds 1 and 2 and was getting taken down and wasn't scoring a whole lot, but rounds 3, 4, and 5, she came alive. Shevchenko has the same ability. If she can even just wear out the first 2 rounds, her cardio gas tank is going to be better than Pena's. She's already fought 5 rounds before. She spent the last 12 weeks in Colorado getting used to the altitude.
Have a lot of people done that? Had these extended camps in Denver?
Most of them have. The problem is a lot of them go 10 days out, 2 weeks out.
Does that do anything?
I'm to believe that it doesn't. I've seen some studies that say 10 days is all you need, but when I see fighters go out 10 days, they don't look good. And if you want to use that as an example, Cain Velasquez, they say...
Went to Mexico City?
Yeah, with 10 days out, okay? It did not help him, now did it? He gassed out astronomically big. So when you look at this fight, it's the same thing. A lot of fighters, in Pena's case, she went out, she says 3 weeks early. Not sure I believe that, but she's at least been there for no less than 2 weeks, let's say. When you're Valentina Shevchenko, not only have you been there for the last 12 weeks and gotten used to it, she's originally from Kyrgyzstan. She spends a lot of time training in Kyrgyzstan.
Very high elevation.
Very high elevation in Kyrgyzstan as well. Like, that's one thing that people don't really factor in. Her sister's a world Muay Thai champion. Her coach is a badass. She's got a good supporting system around her, and she just moves her camp, and it's had great results for her. So in 5 rounds, I know she can go 5 because I've seen her do it against Holly Holm, and she dominated Holly Holm over 5 rounds, never lost a round. I've seen what this girl can do. She thrives the longer the fight goes. Against Amanda Nunes, that's the fight everyone keeps talking about. She gets beat up the first 2 rounds, Pat. But in the 3rd round, she looks like a fresh fighter, willing to push the pace some more. I think that's the key to victory here. I think if Pena is going to win this fight, she's going to have to rely on those takedowns. And I'm not saying she can't get it. I'm just saying in a 5-round fight, it's going to be really hard to get those. So I'm going to say she gets a couple takedowns on her own. She's going to get significant strikes.
So what you're saying, as long as she doesn't get finished, she's going to score a bunch of points.
Yeah, and she's never been finished in her career. So why would I be led to believe that she'll do that now?
Is Pena a finisher?
Pena was a finisher against the absolute lowest level.
Okay.
The absolute lowest level. So she finished her first fight in the UFC against Jessica Berkozy, was a losing record. I think at the time it was 2-4 or 3-4. Her second fight in the UFC, Miliana Dudieva, that girl's already cut as well. And her last 2 performances, she gets step-up fights. Jessica Ai, her last fight, the girl's on a 4-fight losing streak. Jessica Ai rocks her every which way but loose, standing. But she gets the takedowns on Ai, and that ends up winning it for her. Her last fight against Zingano, she loses the first round. Zingano hasn't fought in 17 months because she's had both of her knees operated on, so she gets tired. She's winning, but she's not winning overly exciting. She's not winning in extremely dominant fashion where it's like, oh, she just kicked her ass. No, there's always some spots that you can look at and say, gee, she struggled in these spots. And when you look at Shevchenko, she struggled a little bit against Nunes, but for the most part, it's impressive. You can see the growth there. So I do like Valentina, the bullet Shevchenko.
Your GPP and cash games go with Shevchenko and 2 of the same people on both, so there's not much differentiation. Why these 2 at the bottom?
Well, we'll start off with George Masvidal. George Masvidal is taking on Donald Cerrone. The biggest thing here, and I know I put him on GPP, but I'll explain myself for cash game first of all, is that George Masvidal hasn't been finished since 2009. And that's not to say he only fights a couple times a year. He fights a lot, and he's more durable than anything you've ever seen. Yes, he's been finished in his career, but as I mentioned, in the last 7+ years, no man has been able to put away George Masvidal. In this spot against Donald Cerrone, it should be action-packed. They should be both throwing strikes. I see Masvidal getting the nod. I really do. He's the underdog. He's extremely well-priced on DraftKings. I'm going to go with him to get the nod. The thing is, even if he doesn't get the nod, he will go the 3 rounds, and he will land some significant damage. So therefore, I'm okay with having him in my lineup.
Even at a loss, especially in a cash game. I mean, for GPP, you would want him to win. But for a cash game, if he loses 3 rounds and scores 60 points, you're fine.
Exactly. Ideally, I'm going to have him win because he's on my GPP team as well.
Yeah.
But I'm always thinking worst case scenario. And when I do the cash game team, that's what I'm thinking. Francis Ngannou does have a worst case scenario. He could get taken down and submitted in the first round. I just don't see it happening. But when I look at Spicy I look at Knight.
Would that be worth playing a GPP without putting Ngannou?
Yeah, Francis Ngannou.
Ngannou, instead of putting him at the top and taking Arlovsky instead?
Well, Arlovsky's the cheapest player in
he's $6,600.
So if you take him, you can afford everything else.
But it doesn't seem like. Let's say you did put him on your team at $6,600. Like, is it even? Are there 5 guys that you really need to pay up for? It doesn't seem like it.
That's the exact problem. On this card, there's so many close fights. I mean, we do a survivor pool where essentially you have to pick everybody on the card. And everyone's all worried.
Everyone wants the first pick to get Ngannou, and then who knows?
Yeah, and even then, it's not the safest pick. I'm one of the last picks, and everyone's like, oh, that's not going to be good. I don't really care, because most of these are 50-50, and I know I'll just be able to squeak one who's the underdog who I think is going to win. Maybe George Masvidal is that guy. Does Arlovsky have a chance? Absolutely. You can't write this guy out. However, did BJ Penn have a chance? I probably said he did too. And it turns out he didn't. And it turns out the same thing here. We had Yair Rodriguez, so it wasn't like I was super big on BJ. But because of the stuff they've done in their past, it really makes you think that maybe, just maybe, I'm going to get a vintage performance. Vintage Arlovsky kills this guy. Why? Because I've never even seen Francis Ngannou ever have a win over a high-level guy. Arlovsky, everyone says, oh, he's been knocked out in his last 3 fights, or he's been finished his last 3 fights. Yeah, former UFC champion, former Strikeforce and K1 champion, current UFC champion, all the best guys. The thing is that the chin doesn't matter if it's a good guy or a bad guy hitting you. It's how big is the guy hitting you. And Francis Ngannou at 6'4" with an 83-inch reach is going to hit him. And when he hits him, he's going to make him pay. With Masvidal, he's a very sharp technician, a surgeon, if you will. Thing is that putting Donald Cerrone putting him away would be One tough task as well. The things that I see for the path to victory is, one, how do you beat Donald Cerrone? Well, if you're going to finish him, go to the body. We've seen guys go to the body hurt him before. We've seen Rafael dos Anjos go there. We've seen Anthony Pettis go there. You can work this guy to the body. Looks better at 170, but you can work him to the body. When I look at George Masvidal, whoo, baby, he can work the body. He's got a nasty body kick. He's got a nasty liver punch. And I'm sure if he's looked at any footage on Donald Cerrone and seen that as a path to victory, then he'll exploit it. So can he get the knockout? Sure. But more so than that, I just need him to bully him. I need him to get in Donald Cerrone's face. I need Donald Cerrone to think to himself, oh no, I don't want to be here, and be on the back foot. And then the last point on that fight is that UFC in Toronto, how long ago would you say that was?
Month?
Actually, longer than that. However, not that long ago, right?
Was it 6 weeks ago?
7 weeks, I believe. Donald Cerrone fought on that night against Matt Brown. Director A-Rap, producer A-Rap, whatever you want to call him. Him and I were both there. We got money on Donald Cerrone. We both got Matt Brown winning 2 rounds. Now, when I went on the internet afterwards, they had Cerrone winning the fight, so maybe it's the emotion of being there live, but no denying that he got dropped in the second round. He took some hellacious shots and got damaged. On top of that, he was like riding an ATV in the weeks before, and a branch hit him in the eye. And now you see him, his eye's mangled, it's all scarred up. He got in a war 7 weeks ago, and now he's getting a quick turnaround against Masvidal. Masvidal fought 8 weeks ago and never got a scratch on him because he dusted Jake Ellenberger effortlessly. So I think, geez, one guy's going to be in pretty good shape right now. And Donald Cerrone, maybe a little bit banged up.
Jeremy Kimball.
Jeremy Kimball, this one is one hell of a risk.
$7,100. Risk for a cash game.
Risk or reward, baby. We're going big on Jeremy Kimball.
All right.
Jeremy Kimball is what? The second cheapest guy here. And his opponent is the second most expensive guy on the list, Marcos Rogerio de Lima. If Kimball comes through and Kimball yokes him out the way I think he can and will, we are sitting pretty, man. Because I don't think a whole lot of guys are going to play Jeremy Kimball. He's coming on short notice. He's in atrocious shape. So anybody that makes a team post weigh-ins is not going to pick this guy. He looks like a fool, but boy, oh boy, can he fight. He can fight for sure. And I'm really happy to see him in this spot because he's going to get overlooked, and I think he's got one hell of a shot, man.
Like for a quick finish. Like if he doesn't finish quick, does he have a shot?
Well, here's a little background story for Jeremy Kimball. So I had watched this guy in his regional scene. You know me, I watch a lot of MMA, but I like Jeremy Kimball. And at the time, he's training with a guy named Thomas the Wildman Denny. Thomas Denny, my guy. So I'm having that show in Toronto. I'm looking for pro fighters, obviously. I'm looking for a guy who's 205 pounds to take on the local Toronto guy, Todd Stout. I reach out to Thomas Denny. I said, hey, I'm looking at Jeremy Kimball, and I'd love to have this guy in the card at 205. He tells me, listen, Jeremy's not a 205er. Kimball is a 185er, and we want to keep him at 185. And thanks, but no thanks. We'll send you another guy, Jeremy Oshim. So we got Oshim instead. Kimball never came, okay? Kimball's next fight, he missed weight by like 10 pounds. The fight after that, he missed weight again. Big fat dynamo can't make 185. So now he's comfortably at 205. And when he does try to cut back down to 185, it zaps him. He ends up losing to Perry Filkins and Chris Camozzi in fights that he probably should have won, but he's zapped. So he moves to 205, Pat, and I don't think he's going to be that good. I really like Jeremy Kimball. I'm a big fan of his, but I don't think he's going to be that good at 205. I was wrong. Looks good. And the biggest thing here is that you don't expect him to have good jiu-jitsu, but once he gets on your back, you're toast. And I've seen him in a lot of good spots against good fighters, UFC veterans. And the second he gets to your back, he makes you pay. He makes you pay big time. So when I look at Rogerio de Lima here, Marcos Rogerio de Lima comes to the UFC, and even before that, he fought Mike Kyle in Strikeforce in 2011. Big, strong Brazilian guy, looking to throw bombs. They say he's a black belt in BJJ, but routinely you see him get taken down, and he doesn't got anything off his back. So now, go to his fight with Nikita Krylov. Krylov is known as a striker. He's a karate black belt. Krylov goes, gets this guy down, ices him with a rear naked choke. And it didn't really look like maybe it was guillotine. Didn't really look like he was really trying to fight it off. It was more so just he was trying to grab the guillotine, would flop to his back, and then would give up. Eventually, Krylov submits him. Krylov not particularly known for his submissions. Then he gets this fight against Antigulov. I made good money on this because once again, they got Marcos de Lima as a big favorite over this unheralded Russian with a good submission game. The Russian goes in, gets him down, chokes him out. This guy's got serious problems in submission grappling. Now, the last two key factors here, I know Kimball's got good grappling. I know if Kimball gets him down, he's going to submit him. But beyond that, Kimball's coming in short notice replacement. So if you're De Lima, you've been getting ready for a completely different style of opponent. Now, Jeremy Kimball lives and trains full-time in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
He's used to the altitude. He's not going to get tired. We got De Lima here, who gasses at regular sea level, can't go 3 rounds, and is a suspect submission defense. So not only would it be great if $7,100 Jeremy Kimball won, it'd be great if he just won. He gets a quick submission. We're laughing, brother. At least we're sitting good, and that's what I'm hoping is going to happen here.
All right, so the GPP team is very similar, except you have Ngannou, you have Shevchenko, Masvidal, and Kimmel, but you have Alvi the racist dragon. He's there.
The slayer of the racists. God. He took out Alex Nicholson.
Oh.
We will reserve judgment for one Alex the Spartan Nicholson. Sam Alvey, here's the only issue I don't like about this fight, is that Sam Alvey just too patient. Sits there and waits and waits and waits.
How often does
waits.
Nate Marquardt fight? I feel like he's on every one of these cards.
Well, how often does Sam Alvey fight? Way more.
Does he? I don't know. Just, maybe it's the name Marquardt sticks out to me.
Sam
it's a very
Alvey,
unique name.
Sam Alvey lost to Elias Theodorou.
Our guy Elias.
In Ottawa.
Elias cut his hair yet?
No.
He's never cutting that hair, is he?
He's doing a Hard Knocks broadcast this weekend, actually.
Oh,
doing
really?
A little play-by-play, actually.
Is he on UFC Halifax?
I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so.
When is UFC Halifax?
February 19th?
You going?
I'd like to. Yeah.
I'll take you there, show you around my hometown.
Yeah, show me around. All the hot spots.
There's like 3.
Do you think
they're all
when
within
they
10 feet of each other.
Do you think when they pan to like celebrities in the crowd, they'll go to Donnie Dumphy?
I would say, listen, if we like pan to celebrities in the crowd of UFC Halifax, they might just pan to me. That's how low budget this event's gonna be.
Quick offhand comment. You were talking about your wedding, and you were like, I want to get this band that's local to play, but just a little too much.
They were too much money.
What was the band?
The Melatones.
Okay.
The Melatones are a cover band that play at the Seahorse every Thursday.
And they're due to your price range.
They were $10,000. I'm not paying $10,000
crazy.
for their cover band, and I have to put them up and meet like their rider. I'll hire a DJ for $300.
That's true. Now, what do you think Dumphy would cost?
Less. A bag of crack and $100, and like a bag of salt and vinegar chips.
No, what is it? A case of beer, pack of darts, and the rest on bologna.
Case of bologna, maybe a bucket of salt beef. Also, Donnie Duffy not from Halifax. He's from Newfoundland.
Yeah, Newfoundland. Putting Newfoundland on the map.
Just like Danny Cleary.
He's on the cup next to him. Getting back to Sam Alvey, the biggest thing with Sam Alvey, the redheaded Sam Alvey, same as Donnie Dumphy, is that he's just very lackadaisical. He waits on the punch, waits on the punch, waits on the punch. That'll cost him in some spots. The thing he's been on this real excellent roll with is they've matched him up with guys who are not known to take a punch. So as a result, he doesn't really have to do much against Cesar Mutanche, but he's going to hit him, he's going to knock him out, and he does. Doesn't have to do much against Dan Kelly, but he's going to hit him, he's going to knock him out, and he does. Same thing with Kevin Casey. It's the same thing, rinse and repeat. If your chin's not up to snuff, it doesn't matter he doesn't throw a whole lot, because the one he does throw is going to put you down. When you look at Nate Marquardt, that's exactly it. He's known as a chinny fighter. Now, in his defense, he's losing to the best guys. The best guys is in the best power punchers, and I mean that in Hector Lombard and Jake Allenberger, just excellent straight-up power punchers. Kelvin Gastelum beat him on pure volume. In fact, never knocked him out. His corner had to throw in the towel because he had just taken such a beating. But we know how good Kelvin Gastelum is.
Now, was it one of these situations like when Bret Hart got the towel thrown in on when Owen Hart stole it and threw it in just to screw him?
Oh,
Does that happen?
Worse. In the UFC, and this is shocking to me, but it's a real thing. It's the referee's discretion whether he wants to.
He acknowledges the towel?
You can just be like, nope. I've seen that once, but the ref is like, I never saw the towel. And you're like, fair enough. But that guy did not need to take those last 5 punches to the head. Just didn't need to. When I look at Marquardt, I think that's exactly it. Yes, he's losing to Thiago Santos, and yes, he's losing to Kelvin Gastelum, guys that are big power punchers. Is Sam Alvey a big power puncher? Not to the naked eye, but that one shot that does land has a lot of power in it. And his biggest thing is he needs you to come at him. Elias ran away from him. There was no engaging, therefore he couldn't get going. These other guys, they're going at him, and they're paying the ultimate price. Nate Marquardt's a guy that 50 pro fights in his career. He's been around for the longest time. So he's from an era where you don't run away. He's from an era where you don't run from the fire, you run to the fire. And that's how everybody was. And even though he's 38 years old now, and he's getting older, and he's been knocked out and finished quite a few times, old habits are hard to break, and he runs towards the fire. And I think for that reason, Alvey should be able to clip him. Sam Alvey's appropriately priced at $9,000 because of his track record with finishing guys, and Marquardt's track record for getting finished. But I didn't put it on a cash game team because I'm not overly comfortable with it. I will assure you if Alvey loses, he will lose the decision. And whereas I say I want those guys on a cash game, he'll lose the decision where he doesn't do anything.
Yeah, he's not a high volume scorer.
I need a high volume
But if he
decision
wins,
guy.
he wins quick.
He should be able to knock Nate Marquardt out. Now, I had him redlined for winning this fight, and the more that I'm waiting for it, and the more that it's building up, and the more a tape I'm watching, Nate Marquardt undoubtedly has a chance. It's just that if that chin fails him the way it has in the past, he's going down.
So if you were to bet this fight,
yeah,
just on the money line or on the prop line, something like that, if you were going to bet it, would you have LV like, 1 round, LV 2 rounds, that kind of thing? Like, would you bet him decision?
Yeah, because once again, he doesn't do a whole lot.
Okay.
And now Nate Marquardt's always been from Colorado. So the fact that he's fought 50 times and he's from there, altitude won't affect him, I should say. In Alvy's case, Alvy's fought a couple 5-round fight up in Alberta where he was the Maximum Fighting Championship, middleweight champion. And he was known for knocking guys out in the 4th and 5th round. So he can go late. Also, because he doesn't do a whole lot, he doesn't tire himself out a whole lot. He just waits on that kill shot. And to his credit, people are always like, can't put money on this guy, just don't know. He's won 3 in a row with the same tactic, so maybe it does work for him against the right opponent. This looks like it's the right opponent.
I noticed a theme here with both of your teams, really. You're picking on a guy named De Lima, you're picking on a guy named De Silva, you're picking on a guy named De Chirio, or the hell his name is.
Chirico.
Sure. So you're picking on De Silva.
Well, let me
get rid of the does.
Let me ask you
if they
this.
spelled their name with D apostrophe, would that change your opinion on it?
I didn't even notice the trend, but if I'm going to defend this stereotypical trend, imagine you had to pick fighter A or fighter B. Now you don't know.
A.
Fair enough. But you don't know anything about either guy. The only one hint I'm going to give you is that one guy's flying from the other side of the world to come over to Denver to fight at altitude that they may have never experienced before. When you look at the Brazilian and the Italian fighters here, that's the case that they're in. They might try to come out early, but they got jet lag to deal with right off the bat. Also, if your home is in Italy and your network's in Italy, are you going to come stateside and stay for 3 weeks so that you can make 10 grand? No chance. Mathematically, it doesn't make sense. The fighters that are from Colorado have that advantage. And there's a lot of fighters on this list that have called up their contacts in Colorado and said, hey, do you mind if I come train with you for 3 weeks or a month? And those people have been very welcoming. Yes, come down. The guys that maybe don't have those contacts, or they're maybe new to the UFC, or they don't have that bankroll to spend on it, well, those are the guys that are going to get themselves in some trouble. And I think these young, unproven, unranked competitors who are making this massive flight over, it's going to affect them. And by the way, in 2 of their cases, when you look at De Silva and De Lima, they're classically known for bad gas tanks at sea level. So put them at altitude, it's going to be worse, man. Absolutely going to be worse.
So Jordan Johnson makes a team just because of that, or is he good?
Jordan Johnson is actually taking this fight on short notice. The thing he's got going from is he's from Arizona, which doesn't have massive altitude, but I know that there are some mountains there that you could get ready for. But he fought, his last fight I think was in August of last year. It was an RFA title fight. He went all 5 rounds, and he won all 5 rounds. He had a point deducted in the first round, so that was a 9-9.
Nut shot?
But other than that, actually it was a nut shot and then a knee to the head on the ground. But 2 fouls, loses a point for one of them. He dominates the whole fight. He dominates it with his wrestling. He's a guy that's wrestled collegiately, I believe, from Arizona. He also spent some time in San Diego. But the main thing is here that he's a collegiate wrestler. And he comes into these spots, and when we see him through his 6-0 pro career, is that he's just better wrestler than these guys. So he takes them down, he dominates them. Blue belt on the ground, but good enough that once he gets you down, he's so big, he's so exhausting, he's so heavy, it's hard to get him off.
How's his ground defense?
Well, he's 6-0, so we haven't really seen it tested. Now, when you look at Frankenstein's listed as having a black belt. And 2 fights ago, he physically submitted a black belt in Joachim Christensen. Everything's the sky's the limit here. But, once again, I'm going to take it back to director Arab. His favorite fighter, Paul the Bear Jew Craig, iced Frankenstein with the submission game. So now you think, okay, he can get caught in submissions. But hey, he's got a great chin, right? He's actually been dropped in the in all of his 3 wins leading up. So he beat Ildemar Alcantara, got dropped in it. Signed with the UFC and got Johnny Bravo, gets dropped. The follow-up performance against Joachim Christensen, gets dropped. Chin might be suspect. Suspect in the sense that he can go down, he can get back up. But hey, going down, score me some points on DraftKings. And also, he fights with his foot on the gas the whole time. So he's cooked after 5 minutes. Normally he's cooked after 5 minutes. In this case, Jordan Johnson takes him down. He holds him down. He tires him out. I think it's going to go to the decision. But the way this guy tires and the way he gets damaged, and the way he gets dropped,
and
100% he could just break apart.
He could break apart, but what you're saying too is Jordan Johnson could rack up a lot of DraftKings points even along the way, even if it does go to decision.
Jordan Johnson's last fight, it was 5 rounds, scored something like 8 takedowns. And in those takedowns...
Well, he's averaging 0 points. This is his first fight?
First fight in the UFC. 8 takedowns in his last fight in RFA. And on top of that, once he gets you down, he's looking to pass. And he's looking to take your back. And he's looking to get the choke in. But he's moving. And if for whatever reason you get back up, this is the beauty. And people at home don't want to hear this. People at home 100% don't want to hear this. But I don't care personally because I love fighting. And this would be good for us. But in his RFA fight, he takes the guy down. Okay? Nothing goes on for 2-3 minutes. The ref's like, okay, up. He gets up. The ref goes, go. He takes him back down. That's a guy that's sticking to the game plan. I love that.
So he's like the guy when you're playing GoldenEye that just knows where you're respawning to go kill you?
Well,
Stand him up, take him back down. Oh, no, I'm in that bathroom thing.
Yeah, but people are always like, when it gets stood up and it's their fighter, they're like, all right, I could stand up, ref, all right, I need that back down. And as a fighter, the ref's telling you, you're not doing anything on the ground. Back up.
Do something.
You're like, back to what I was doing before because I don't care, and I have the ability to take the fight exactly where I want to, when exactly I want to. So there's no denying Frankenstein's very dangerous, and if you want to play some GPP, hey, Frankenstein's not a terrible play in a GPP just because of the way this guy's finishes. If you look at how much he averages, he's quite a point getter in his own right, but against a higher echelon competition, I think Jordan Johnson will be that, training at the lab, training with the better guys. I think he's going to be able to prevail that. And I always say this, but last point, Frankenstein lost to Bearju not all that long ago. They had rebooked him in a fight in Brazil for like 6 weeks from now. For whatever reason, they yanked that fight off and stuck it in Colorado. But he's getting too fast of a turnaround, way too fast of a turnaround. And because it's virtually short notice for him, I don't know that he was able to travel from Brazil over to Denver and get that time in. So I think he's going to fade more than he normally fades. And Jordan Johnson, who just fought 25 minutes in his last outing, should be more than enough to be able to take him down, control him, get that victory.
What was the fight that gave you the most trouble? Like, you just don't know. Like, obviously, you're going to have to make a pick because you do a pick show, and that's just the way these things go.
But
But
was
just
the
like
entire card?
just out of the card, like, what are some of these coin flip fights? Like, you're just like, I'll just take that side.
Well, there's actually quite a few of them.
Okay,
And,
hit me.
And if people watch Bookie Beatdown, they'll be like, well, you switch some of these picks, but these are the notable ones that I believe.
But that's
I've
sort of the
switched.
thing. Like, you're not confident on either side, but where you do a show, you're forced to make a pick.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest one that stands out is Li Jiang Li, right? Or Jingliang Li. Chinese fighter, very big, very physical, 170 pounds, big guy. Now, his opponent, Bobby Nash, is a short-nosed replacement. Bobby Nash has never fought anybody nearly on the same level as Li Jingliang Li. He's never been in the same class as him. For sure, this guy's going to be the better guy. On top of that, this is his UFC debut on short notice at altitude. And Jingliang Li is now fought in the UFC. This is going to be his 6th performance. He looked good his last time out. He's very strong, very durable, as I mentioned. This was an earmark shot for Li Jingliang. He's going to get this win over Bobby Nash. But the more I think about it, Bobby Nash is a guy that wrestled at the Michigan State. He's a Spartan, right? So he's a guy that comes from a good wrestling background. Now, when you put him in MMA, he doesn't know a whole lot about striking. So he has to rely on that background of the wrestling. And that makes him very one-dimensional. It allows the opponents to see what's coming. And to his credit, he's still 8-1, which is still a good record, but he's not the most refined. Now, we don't necessarily know what we're going to get out of this guy because he's so young to the sport. He's ever developing every single day.
So he could show you something new this weekend. You'd be like, oh,
I'd be
this
like,
guy's a lot better than I thought.
Yeah, like, oh, wow. And you see that a lot. Guys debut, you look at the regional stuff, like, this guy's no good. Francis Ngannou, if you look at his regional show stuff, you'd be like, he can't stuff a takedown, he has no ground game. Oh, but he's got a lot of power. But now you see him in the UFC, you're like, wow, he's young to MMA. He's making a lot of improvements. Bobby Nash relies on that wrestling. Now, when I look at Jingliang Li has always had trouble versus wrestlers. David Machado is able to go out there and take him down, and his hips are just square to the ground. He'll just accept it. In his last fight against Anton Zafir, he takes on an Australian fighter known for his grappling, but not known in the slightest bit for his wrestling abilities. This guy goes out, doubles him to the ground. He survives. The ref stands them up. He just takes down Anton Zafir, and he punches him out. Great. But it's a real glaring hole when you see that he doesn't move his hips on the ground. He locks you up, and he tries to accept it. If he goes in there against Bobby Nash is a far better wrestler than that. Bobby Nash is a better wrestler than most of the guys that are training at a China top team, and Li Jingliang has had to come over from China for this fight. So people will tell you Bobby Nash is short notice. He's going to get tired at altitude. Well, technically this is short notice for both guys because he thought he was taking on somebody else, so it's a different matchup. Physically he'll be fit, but he's also got to make that entire travel over from China to physically get to the fight. So it's going to affect him a little bit. Can Bobby Nash go out there, score a couple takedowns and hold him down? Absolutely. Would I put him on my team? No, because I think he's going to score really low and try to score a stinker. But when I look at the straight betting value, I think dog with a chance.
When you say he's a dog, I mean, they're the same price on DraftKings. In terms of the betting market, what are they? Are they close?
Well, I would pick Jingliang if that was the case. Jingliang Li.
Like, all things being equal.
He knock guys out.
Yeah, all things being equal, you would pick him. But what's the betting line on it?
Oh, the betting line when I checked it was, I believe, minus 185 was what it started at for Li Jingliang.
So Bobby Nash is like plus 150?
It's moving down.
Plus 120, something like that?
It's closing up, but that's what it started off when we did Bookie Beatdown. And like I said, I'm thinking to myself, this is easy money. The more you think about it, the more you do your research. You always got to think to yourself. This is the biggest thing I've learned in my life.
Yeah,
right?
and what you know on Monday, especially when you keep looking at it day in, day out, and you hear other people's opinions on it, maybe something you haven't heard of. You're talking to Robin, you're talking to Pollock, you're talking to Ramsey, and you're doing more of your own research, that kind of thing. You talk to Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, when he's not infiltrating your mind with hot take bachelor.
True. Lots of that. I just mean you always have to look at what's the worst case scenario. What is the one thing that could go wrong, and how much would it affect me? And a lot of people, this guy's gonna kill him. But what's the worst case scenario? Nothing. He's gonna kill him. It's just like, well, then you're not seeing it, right? What's the worst case scenario for Jing Liang Li? That he gets taken down, he gets dominated. Now you have to put what's the percentage chance of that happening? Well, against Bobby Nash, that's what he's gonna be looking to do. And I love using this line, so I'll just throw it out there some more. Last thing on this fight, Pat, is that Bobby Nash was getting ready to fight 2 weeks ago against Daquan Townsend in Michigan. So is that Michigan? Sure. But to think he's coming off the couch and coming into a big, high-profile UFC fight, blatant mistake. He's coming off a fight. He was training hard for a title fight that was scheduled to go 5 rounds. Now he's getting thrown into the UFC. So I think he has a training camp. I think he's taken the necessary steps, and the takedown should play dividends. So why not?
But it's a stay-away fight for you.
This card, I'm not going to lie, stay away fight. I like Aljamain Sterling over Rafael Assunção, but geez, you'd probably want to stay away from that fight. I love me some Jason Knight, but hey, could Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres show some tricky situations? Absolutely. Looking at the whole thing, Alexander Pantoja, people are big on this guy. I like Eric Sheldon. I like him so much. But how can you beat Eric Sheldon? Get on his back. What does Pantoja do best? Gets on the back. This card is all over the place, but these are the cards that are super exciting. These are the cards that you got to be smart with. But at the end of the day, I just love fighting. This is what I love to do. Someone's telling me this is a weak undercard. You know what you're talking about. This is a fantastic undercard.
Well, and when it comes to the undercard, wouldn't you just want to see, regardless of you want to see high quality, obviously, but as long as it's close and they're like fair fights and even money fights, isn't that better?
Well, fair fights are always great. Nobody likes anything more than a good, clean, fair fight. The problem is that...
Or an exciting fight.
When the UFC gets excellent matchmaking, and the matchmaking has been pretty on point lately, is that you get a lot of decisions. And we've seen a lot of decisions at the UFC level. I mean, I would love to tell you 6 finishes, but I can't spot 6 finishes, and likely there won't be 6 finishes. But so you have to take a couple guys that are going to the decision.
Is that a product of matchmaking, or is that a product of the fighters at the UFC level? No. If I just go to a decision, even if I lose, I'm going to get another fight out of this.
Well, that's the problem that guys like Nate Marquardt and Andrei Arlovsky might be good for them to think, geez, you know what? Maybe I'll just dance around.
I'm going to
get a win.
I'm going to last.
And I can sign a new contract. The new contract's 3 fights that ensures me. They just go in there and they fight. That's how they're bred. That's the old school. That's why people love those type of fighters. It's a dying breed.
But the new guys are... saving themselves for more fights. So instead of getting 9 fights, maybe I can get 20 fights.
Well, you look at Jordan Johnson, right? Jordan Johnson's making his UFC debut here, and he's got 6 pro fights. You look at Bobby Nash. Bobby Nash is making his UFC debut here. He has 9 pro fights. Nate Marquardt made his UFC debut. He had 35 pro fights. You know, like it's a bygone era that just doesn't exist anymore. But when I look at it, it's really easy for people to say, man, Jason Gonzalez, who's Jason Gonzalez? Alessio Di Chirico, who's Alessio Di Chirico? All these guys are standouts where they're from. They just haven't had the chance to show you that yet. So I heard someone shitting on Jordan Johnson. They're saying, man, this guy's got less than 10 fights. He's 6-0. He hasn't done anything. How did he get signed to the UFC? He's the RFA champion. He won a prestigious regional show title. You're taking the best guys from the feeder leagues and putting them in the UFC. That's the way it should be. So I don't look at the undercard and see a bunch of nobodies. I see a bunch of guys that were the best guys. Put it this way, right? Gavin Tucker, he's from Halifax. Actually, I think he's from Newfoundland. But he lives and trains out of Halifax, and he's going to be on the Halifax card, 9-0. I can assure you, everyone's going to say, never heard of this guy. Everyone's going to say, who's Gavin Tucker? Everyone's going to say, never fought anybody. But what you have to realize is he's the best East Coast fighter at 145 pounds. Therefore, it's logical that he gets signed to the UFC because he's the best guy from where he's from. And if you sign all the best guys from all the different areas...
You're eventually going to find some superstars?
Some of them are going to be superstars, some of them are not. But you're also going to get 2 fights where it's like 2 alphas are going at it. And there's nothing sweeter than seeing the kid from Michigan, who everyone was like, next George St. Pierre, versus the kid from Louisiana, who everyone's like, next Daniel Cormier, and one of them gets clowned. And it's like, bam, back to the drawing board. Bet you didn't see that one coming. But that's the game. Everyone's always evolving. You got to stay one step ahead of it. And that's why some of these guys who are from that past generation, the game's just slipping by them ever so slightly. Not a bad thing. It's just that's sports in general.
Do you think the DraftKings pricing will be out by Wednesday afternoon next week?
It's hard to tell. On weeks where they don't have a UFC event leading up, I feel they get it out fairly early. So this week it came out on Tuesday. Wednesday, which I get is not super early, but at the same time, early enough. Early enough that we could shoot this show and not have to worry on a Thursday or a Friday, whatever. I know you're busy next week, so we would like it to come out on the Wednesday.
I leave. I'm only here till Wednesday next week. I'm gone Thursday and
what
Friday.
time do you leave? I would say it's out by Wednesday, but because it's back-to-back card, that's where it might drop.
What is the card next week? Is it a paper? If it's a pay-per-view, then they probably will have it out.
But yeah, so I mean, big fights. Do you think that makes a difference?
Yeah, I do.
The bigger the card, the earlier they'll have it out.
Yeah, I think so. Well,
Yeah.
it seems to me.
I feel like McGregor and Rousey cards, sure, but the rest of them, I feel like it's all subject.
Maybe so. Like, what is the card next week? Is it UFC 208?
That's the one, right? So
that's not next week though. That's the week after, isn't it? Isn't that
Yeah, next. Okay, so then there's no card next week.
February? There's no card next week.
If that's the card, if this is the
Well,
card,
just look
after-
behind you. It says on the poster right behind you what the date is. I can't see it. You're blocking it. February 11th. So not next week.
Not next week. So there you go.
So there's no card next week.
I don't know, dude. I'm watching Bellator on Friday. I got UFC on Saturday. I got Hard Knocks is also on Friday. I'll deal with the card when it comes. Maybe it's next week. Maybe it's the week after.
So you have no idea. There is one next week. Fight Night 104.
There you go. We can break down that one when it comes.
So if the DraftKings pricing is out
right
by Wednesday of next week, I'll still be here. I'll be here late. You live around the corner. I'll drag you back in.
Great times.
We'll have a show. If not, there will be no show. Although there is a 45-minute discussion that you and I had about Rousey, McGregor, and the business of UFC, which I've just had tucked away for a while, waiting for when I went away to have some
That's the problem with
content.
this evergreen stuff. Then I'll read the comments and they'll be like, man, why are they talking about McGregor and Rousey?
Yeah, we filmed it like 3 weeks ago.
This is shot a month ago.
Listen, I knew I was going away. I had to build up some
fair
content
enough.
for when I'm away.
Smart Pat Mayo.
And listen, when I get back from my bachelor party, I'm not going to be in great shape. So there might not. I'll probably sneak in on a Friday and do the UFC.
No, well, there you go.
208.
You know, quite a few fighters on this card from Arizona. So
I'll go talk to them when I'm down there.
yeah, if they're not too banged up.
Probably.
I have them bet, so hopefully they're not too banged up.
All right, perfect. Cody Saftic. Check him out on Twitter at CJ Saftic and watch and listen to the Bookie Beatdown every single week for the betting odds. A lot of the time, the DraftKings pricing is not out when you do that, so that's why you got to watch this show.
Yeah,
Get
absolutely.
your teams in. Although I think most people just skip ahead, look at the lineup, and click off. Because they can't stand me, and with you, they just like your picks. And they've already heard all the good stuff on Bookie Beatdown.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like they'd like anybody. So it doesn't really matter to me, man. Put out good picks. I enjoy doing the show. I hope you do as well. And if they've listened to this far into it, then they do as well. So thank you for that.
This is true. You can follow Cody on Twitter, like I mentioned, at CJ Saftic, and the Bookie Beatdown at Bookie_Beatdown. You can subscribe to it, the audio version at least, on iTunes and Podomatic, which you can do the same thing for the Pat Mayo Hour, but you can double up on that by downloading on Stitcher and Audio Boom as well for the video versions. Check it out at the Fantasy Sports Network YouTube page, along with the Fight Network YouTube page, and on Roku and Apple TV and Xbox One and Amazon Fire Stick. So if you have anything that has an on-demand feature, you can find the Pat Mayo Hour. Swear to God. Pat Mayo, good luck this week. I'll see you next time.